World Bank Group is floating a new business and investment climate survey report that looks to replace the discredited Doing Business survey that was discarded back in September of 2021. In the meantime, the International Monetary Fund says sub-Saharan African economies could be seriously impacted if the ongoing global geopolitics is prolonged. Joining me to discuss this and more is Professor Ken Ife, a public policy analyst and a development economist from our Abuja studios. It's great having you on the show tonight, sir. Thanks for coming through. Let's start with the World Bank new methodology. What do you make of this new methodology for business climate and investment survey that this World Bank is looking to replace the suspended Doing Business report?
No, I think it was actually long overdue. For a review, a major review, strategic review. So the audit and the survey only came to justify the need for them to change. Of course, you know that there are accusations that is biased towards China and that there was a data integrity deficit on that thing. Now, what has happened now is that there are 4 new major things that have entered into the equation, which is a workers' right, which is the labor. Then secondly, you have the insolvency, because it's looking at business life cycle from the time your business enters into the marketplace till when it exists, which is insolvency. So it looks at all the issues about competitiveness, which is also new in the way it came in. And then also you have this sustainability. But apart from that, the most critical thing about the new structure is the triangulation. The triangulation of enterprise, labor, and consumer. Now, previously, it has always been around the experience of enterprise experience. But now they are triangulating it so that you see the perspective of the labor, because labor is increasingly agitating anyway, and they're a very important factor of production. So now you see consumer perspective. So you now have 3 major perspectives triangulated on asking the same question, so that you get a broader 360-degree view of the thing. So it's a much better way of assessing the business environment. And even the business environment, you see a gradual shift towards just business environment to business readiness. And then investment reform, climate reform, you see it more in terms of investment readiness. So there's a shift, which will be good, actually.
But how important, Professor, do you think the new report will be driving investment, especially for countries such as Nigeria? What do you think?
No, you see, there are many things. The other one was not picking up. First, for example, insecurity. What is the impact of insecurity on investment? The other data, I can't tell you anything about that. Then even some of the utility. I've been questioning some of their utilities, like you're telling me that you are going to measure the how long it takes to install a telephone line, landline. We don't have landline. I don't know who has landline. All of us have been doing our business, and within a few minutes you register your SIM and you're in business. But then, the measure, I say that measurement, that parameter, it doesn't make any sense to us. And then of course you have the issue of how long it takes you to connect to national grid. And I'm saying, wait a minute, some people are running their business with generator. So how are you going to measure that? So we get penalized because
but that's not right, Professor. Is it right to run your business with generators rather than the national grid? What we have here is an anomaly.
No, but it's not right to penalize. No, it's not right. No, it is not a choice. The businesses didn't make that choice. It's just because they can't wait for so long to have it. And don't forget, there's a survey that says that 68% of manufacturers provide power for themselves 90% of the time. So if you are starting a business, you're going to wait or rely on national grid. You can't. So, but you can't penalize the country's rating because you just measure how many months it takes the person. No, you can't. Because mobile phone, you can pick in 10 minutes, but then to get landline may take you 2 years. So we are being penalized because we didn't actually contribute to the structure of that assessment process. That's a different story now.
But that's assessment process and all that. What do foreign investors, international investors look at when they want to do business with Nigeria?
No, but don't forget, you keep talking about national and foreign investors. Which foreign investors? We have serious issue about FDI that we have to focus on domestic investors, regional investors. We are not talking about, look at the measurements. Dangote put $19 billion in. Do you see him appearing on the FDI? And then we are sitting down here waiting for $2-3 billion of FDI. So we have to, recognize that times have changed and the economies have got more complex, and we have to, the reality is that we have to take metrics that reflect the overall situation of the country. Otherwise, I'm not sure what we are measuring.
Well, okay. Well, the International Monetary Fund says in a new focus report that economic growth in sub-Saharan Africa could permanently decline if the current geopolitical tensions escalate or prolong. Is there a reason to be concerned or worried?
No, we always have to be concerned and worried because countries like Nigeria, because of our import dependence, it means that we are so vulnerable, or something I always described as being on the transmission belt of any potential global supply shock. And then what happens is that we are so exposed, most of our economies are so exposed to foreign shocks. Is the shock either coming from what is happening between Russia and Ukraine, or is from US and the China fallout, a trade war, or with COVID health situation, all kinds of situations that are global are transmitted. Even the failure of one bank or the other, say the Silicon Valley Bank and then another First Nation, any of their failures have ripple effect on our economies. And so that level of vulnerability raises serious concern. And so we continue to worry about that.
Well, so how should economies such as Nigeria prepare and position for the ongoing geopolitics, moving from trade to logistics, now to currencies, countries around the world talking to each other, trying to sidestep the US dollar, for example, looking for new alliances across regions and across continents? How should we position for that? Because it looks like we have a new reality on our hands.
Absolutely, without a doubt. But I think we have to work very cautiously and look a lot more inward in this circumstance. I don't think there's a convenient level to go and sit and wait, because if you look at the global division of labor or international division of labor, it places us in Africa as producer of commodities. And then those commodities are taken up to the West for them to refine and send back to us to consume. And places like European Partnership Agreement says to us, we want to be the supplier of 80% or more of what you consume. And I'm not a real world, because, on one hand, COVID has told us or shown us a deglobalization agenda, where you saw globalization in reverse gear. And then you see countries that you are supplying raw materials to now refusing to send back to you some of the things that they protest. Pharmaceutical, for example, we couldn't get it. India, many of the countries locked down and then no one to send anything to us. So it was a big lesson that we should look inwards for our own economic salvation, especially the Africa Continental Free Trade. Tell me what items that we consume that you cannot find somewhere made in Africa. It's either it's made, if it's machinery, it could be made in China, in South Africa. If it is, there are many things, 90% of all the things we try to import can be made somewhere in Africa. In West Africa, over $100 billion of government procurement is going abroad. But that could be an investment in itself if we deal with local procurement and open up the space. So there's so much more that we can do to leverage our own purchasing power and our own intellectual knowledge assets that we have.
Okay, so the World Economic Forum is worried about the lack of consensus among you economists about a global growth outlook. Why is that so?
Well, if you talk about economies, talk about central banks, because most economies have always been looking inwards when it comes to dealing with issues about recession and issues about growth. But this time round, much of the problem we're having are exogenic. They're actually coming from outside, global headwinds. So most banks, all of them, they know how to deal with inflation. They have hundreds of years of experience on that. They know how to deal with recession. But they don't know how to deal with stagflation. Stagflation is when these two things are pulling in opposite direction. When you have growth slowing down and then inflation going up. They don't have much experience. So what happens is that economies are confused. And rightly so, because most of the issues around those happen to be within the country. And then if you look at specific countries, they have specific challenges. So you cannot generalize at all. And that's why I have difficulty in blanket statements, or no, you can't, because every country is different. Given the effect of the global headwinds in Nigeria, for example, we have structural factors that are pushing inflation. We have supply push inflation, we have demand push inflation, we have imported inflation. So many things. And then agriculture is food supply cruises at the highest level over the last 4 years. Then what do you do about agriculture? Insecurity comes. So, it's difficult. They can't generalize. So that's why you have that level of confusion. Monetary policy is not cooperating enough. We need them to start talking to themselves, the central bankers, to see what common ground that they can find. Fiscal are easier because you come within territorial boundaries, and then the regional trade agreements and regional supply integration. All of that are easier on fiscal, but not on monetary. Monetary policy they're territorial in monetary policy, and that's why it's very difficult.
But that's going to be extremely difficult. Tomorrow, everyone is expecting, for example, the U.S. Fed, the central bank, to raise interest rate by at least another 25 basis points. So why does it all come together between the finance, the central bank, in terms of bringing the fiscal and the monetary together? Briefly.
Well, that's a bit more difficult. But if you look at what is happening in America now, you could see that the gradual rise on the MPR rates and also the knock-on effect on interest rates, and then of course the inflation, all heading up. They're creating problem for the banks. Now they have the banks like Silicon Valley Bank that has gone, and the other one now that is just about to go, having a mismatch between their deposit policy and their investment policy. So short-term deposits mainly, and then you have investment in longer-term instruments. Suddenly, because of the rising costs and rising inflation and rising everybody's looking for cash to meet their expenses. They can't find the cash, so of course social media will tell the story, and then suddenly there will be a run on the banks, and that's exactly what's going on right now.
What's really going on, Professor Ken? It's a whole lot to deal with. But thank you so much, Professor Ken Ife, development economist and public policy analyst. Thank you for your those perspectives. Enjoy the rest of your evening, and see you again on the show sometime soon. Thank you so much.